And welcome back to another installment of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers. Coming solo this week on the podcast, Justin Lowry still unavailable. We could not link up this week with our conflicting schedules. I want to thank Rennie Detour for the great job he did filling in last week as the special co-host. Always great to talk to Rennie, get his unique perspective. If you didn't have the opportunity, go back, check out last week's episode on our YouTube channel to hear his latest takes on the world of professional wrestling. But that's in the past. Now I want to move up to the present with really another interesting week, both in WWE and more particular in All Elite Wrestling. We'll get to the latest news from the new company, if you will, over the next half an hour or so. Also talk about what we saw on Raw and Smackdown. But before we get into that, I want to sort of revisit something from a couple weeks ago. Typically, after each and every pay-per-view, Justin Lowry and I review our predictions, see which one of us did better, see if we did pretty decently making our picks or if we were a little off base. Not to brag too much, but typically I've gotten the better of Justin, and before that, even Sean Saputo with the predictions. That being said, I do need to give credit to my co-host, Justin Lowry, as he clearly won the Royal Rumble prediction categories. Let's take a look at what we picked going into the show. I know it's almost 2 weeks removed now, but just to revisit our choices there. And we had differing opinions on a couple of matches. The WWE Championship match, Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles. I went with AJ. He went with Bryan. And the SmackDown Women's Championship, Asuka and Becky Lynch. So take a look at the predictions. Well, it's not too pretty for my picks. I went just 4 and 5 under 500 this time. Justin Lowry, conversely, 6 and 3. So the two matches we differed on, he got both of them right. I missed them both. You can see we both missed the Women's Royal Rumble. Now, I think the explanation we gave is if Becky Lynch is clearly in it, we were picking her because she was sort of a surprise entrant. We had to go with the safer pick in Charlotte. The Bar losing to Shane McMahon and The Miz, a little surprising. Nakamura knocking off Rusev, that one was really surprising. In that entire title picture, the U.S. title has really been kind of a mess recently. But Justin Lowry certainly wins this time around. So congratulations. I'm sure he'd be gloating about it if he was here right now. But down the road, I'm sure he will remind me of his superiority for this last pay-per-view. Nonetheless, let's jump into what I said was some pretty big news that came out within the last 24 hours or so with All Elite Wrestling. And this is typically Justin's sweet spot, so I won't speak too much to it. I'll let him kind of recap and give his thoughts when he does return, hopefully next week. But the announcement that many anticipated, and I think it became pretty clear over the past couple weeks, the newest addition to the All Elite Wrestling roster is one Kenny Omega. And I think right around the turn of the year, there was a real debate as to whether or not he would go to All Elite, whether or not he would go to WWE. It became pretty clear he was not going to stay full-time in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Last couple weeks, it was pretty obvious which way he was leaning. There was really no indication that he was going to be heading to WWE basically from about mid-January on, and he made it official this week that he is joining All Elite. And they didn't waste any time jumping into his first storyline, his first match at the May event out in Las Vegas, the Double or Nothing. He will be going against Chris Jericho. Big match for sure, but a match that we've already seen this past year if you watch New Japan Pro Wrestling. That being said, different company in the United States. It'll create some interest for sure. Without going into too much detail about this decision, you have to wonder. He's going with his friends. He's starting a new promotion that really he could solidify his place in history if he is the face of a promotion that challenges WWE. That being said, will he have enough fresh feuds? We've already seen him work with, a lot of these guys, including Chris Jericho in recent years. So match number 2, no, you're not sick of it by any means yet, but what's he going to be doing 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now? There's so many options that would have been awaiting in WWE matches that people have been waiting to see. Him and Seth Rollins, for instance, him and AJ Styles, even though obviously they overlapped in Japan. Him and Andrade Cien Almas, Mustafa Ali, Randy Orton. There's, an endless list of guys in WWE that would create interesting matchups. But if All Elite Wrestling does what it intends to do, I'm sure it'll bring in a number of big names where he can have matches with some fresh faces that once again create, classic encounters, 5-star affairs, if you will. But we'll see how it works out. It's something that probably within the first 6 months to a year, we don't know if it's the right decision. We might not know until years down the road. One thing that is interesting is reports are that he is also part, I guess, not just of the creative, but I guess a vice president type role. So behind the scenes, he will have his fingerprints over the promotion, and that's something that WWE would obviously never be able to offer. So you can understand how that could be a deciding factor for Kenny Omega. But it's now official. He's with All Elite Wrestling. Let's jump back to WWE programming this past week. And the biggest storyline, I think, over the past couple of months, really going back to before Survivor Series, is Becky Lynch. What should she be doing? What will she be doing at WrestleMania? Will it be her and Ronda Rousey? Will it be her, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte? Well, we got some answers after the Royal Rumble, where she won the Royal Rumble match and then basically announced the next night she would be challenging Ronda Rousey. So it seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, no, WWE doesn't like to, do things straightforward sometimes. They want to add some intrigue. The question is, did this need any, additional intrigue? Did it need anything else? Or did you already have a main event that everyone wanted to see? Just going Ronda, Becky, not trying to muddy the waters, as Rennie called it last week. Well, we started to see on Raw and then again on Smackdown how they're going to play this one out. Raw kicks off with Stephanie McMahon and Becky Lynch in the ring. And really, Stephanie wasn't coming across too much of a heel, but just everyone's going to treat her as such anyway with her character and, basically what she's established for the past nearly 2 decades. So fans are booing Stephanie, of course. They're cheering Becky Lynch. Stephanie says, Becky, you have to see the doctors about your knee that she injured at the Royal Rumble. It didn't really seem like anything that severe then. And the rumor was they actually sort of botched the spot where she was supposed to be injured. Nonetheless, she hasn't wrestled since then. Now they're playing up the storyline that Becky is potentially trying to hide a serious injury, does not want to go to the doctors. Stephanie on Raw says you have to or else you're going to be suspended. And Becky basically says, I'm not doing that. You can't take this match away from me, so on and so forth. So Stephanie suspends her. Becky subsequently attacks her. And yes, that, creates a huge reaction with the fans. They love seeing Stephanie get beat up, whether it be by Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, whomever. However, it's another, I think, tired approach to a storyline. When WWE is trying to create a new star, I feel like they believe they have to do it using like the authority as the final obstacle for this superstar. We've seen them do it with Daniel Bryan. That's how they book baby faces to ultimately get to the highest level. Oh, they got up to overcome Stephanie and Triple H or Vince or whomever. It's just they do this all the time, and it's not always needed. Becky Lynch is as over as you can possibly be. Why do you need to do this? Just have her and Ronda Rousey together. But they decide this week they are going all in on Becky versus Stephanie. And then on Tuesday, Becky, Triple H. And this is sort of unique because Triple H more or less was coming across as a face on Raw recently. Well, now he's a heel on SmackDown. And it's, it's so hard for people to figure out, well, why is he good one show and bad on another show? He was really coming at Becky, and you can understand, okay, well, Becky beat up his wife. There's motivation there, but are you supposed to cheer Triple H? Are you supposed to boo him? I don't know. Obviously, on SmackDown, in his exchange with Becky, you're supposed to boo him, as Becky slapped him, as you could see in that photo. It seems as though they are doing this to open the door for Charlotte to get into the match. Will Becky Lynch be cleared? She's not seeing the doctors. Until she does, she won't be in the match. Well, if she doesn't see the doctors or if she doesn't get cleared, someone has to replace her. Charlotte was the last woman eliminated in the Royal Rumble. This might be the route that they go to get Charlotte in the match. That's a mistake in my estimation. Charlotte's a great in-ring competitor. Some people really like her character, like her on the mic. I don't at all. I mean, truthfully, I think that she's below average more times than not in that regard. But there's no taking away from the fact that she's one of the biggest stars of all time in terms of women's wrestling in the company. But we've already seen her in this role. We've seen her win championships. We've seen her win big matches at WrestleMania. Just go back a year ago where she knocked off Asuka. I don't think we need Charlotte in this match. I think it actually takes a little bit away from the match. Give Charlotte and Asuka an opportunity for the Smackdown Championship. I mean, Asuka's got to face someone. Who are they looking at as potentially her challenger, with really Asuka, Becky, and Charlotte being the three big names on SmackDown? Well, if you have Becky and Charlotte going for the Raw Championship, then what's Asuka doing? Who's her challenger? It's probably not going to be someone as good as Charlotte. I don't know what they're ultimately going to end up doing, but I really just think this is unnecessary to really play this out, involving the Authority to get Becky Lynch more over. That, not needed. And then, teasing that Charlotte's going to be in it. Well, if she does end up in the match, making it a triple threat at WrestleMania, in my estimation, that actually makes the match a little bit less interesting and less significant in my estimation. It should be one-on-one. There's no reason to change what is clearly working with the fans. We'll stay on Raw and talk about more women's wrestling. It seems like, as I said before, some of the biggest storylines, the biggest matches, and the most interest is behind the women. We saw a little bit of a glimpse of that on Raw as they continue to build towards the upcoming Elimination Chamber pay-per-view with the women's tag team tournament, where they're getting 6 teams that will enter the Elimination Chamber. Well, the last team that was decided took place on Raw, and it was sort of a weird setup. Bayley and Sasha, who have been talking about winning these women's championships long before they were even invented, against Alicia Fox, a traditional heel, and Nikki Cross. And this is where this company just continues to make mistake after mistake. Nikki Cross comes up as a face, gets a good reaction. Fans are cheering for it at the Royal Rumble. Well, now she's a heel. Why? I don't know. If you wanted her to be a heel, bring her up clearly as a heel, establish that. They did not do that. They brought her up as a face. Now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because they needed her as a tag team partner with a heel, they make her a heel. So it leads to a match where I think the fans are a little confused as to what to do. Nikki Cross and Alicia Fox attack Sasha and Bayley before the match, and Sasha is severely injured, supposedly. I believe the real explanation is that she's banged up and it probably was not cleared to wrestle in the match. So they have her basically slowly making her way to the corner. She gets up on the apron but never tags into the match, and it's Bayley who does the work. Bayley wins this one, basically going 1-on-2 as she secures the victory, allows her and Sasha to advance to the Elimination Chamber. There's a few ways to look at this. One, they are clearly putting an emphasis on this particular team of Sasha and Bayley heading into the Elimination Chamber. There's no doubt that it's either going to lead to them winning the championship, or the biggest story is, if they don't win the championship, a potential implosion to follow. So all eyes will be on Bayley and Sasha, and I think that makes sense. They're clearly the biggest names in this tournament. Some of the other teams, the Riot Squad, Mandy Rose, Sonya Deville, the Iconics, that they are what they are. They're sort of mid-level women's talent, and really they're more true tag teams, if you will. But I think that, Sasha and Bayley are bigger than that, and the fact that they are part of this match, it gets more interest in it because people care about Bayley, and they especially care about Sasha. Just look at her showing at the Royal Rumble against Ronda Rousey. She's as good as anyone in this company on the women's side. I don't quite know yet if they will win the titles and then ultimately implode as a result of that, if they will come up short and it leads to a match between them at WrestleMania. but it's starting to look like maybe they're planting the seeds of, oh, Bayley did it all on her own. Bayley is the one that deserves credit. Well, if Sasha somehow tries to take that credit or take the spotlight down the road, it sets up for them going against one another. If I were to bet right now, and we still have a few weeks before Elimination Chamber, I am betting they do not win the championship, and their shortcomings lead to ultimately Sasha and Bayley going at it, hopefully, potentially at WrestleMania this year. Another thing that was, I think, sort of unique on Raw was the handling of Dean Ambrose. And Rennie and I talked and speculated, is this Ambrose leaving a storyline? Is it real life? Is it real life that they might try to turn into a storyline? You know what? I think on Monday, we sort of got an answer that they did not acknowledge this on TV. They didn't continue to build up him and Triple H. They sort of just put Dean Ambrose in a position you would put someone who appears to be leaving the company, putting over a newer, younger talent, if you will, although in this case I'm not even sure that the younger talent is actually younger. It was Dean Ambrose who came out interrupting a moment of bliss as Alexa was interviewing EC3, one of the newcomers to the main roster. And much like Nikki Cross, EC3 has not clearly been established as, is he a face? Is he a heel? You think of the character, this cocky guy who loves to look at himself, so on and so forth. It screams heel. That's always been a heel in WWE. I'm okay with them making him a face, but why should we support him? I mean, in NXT, he kind of was he was a cooler guy that it made sense that he turned from sort of heel at the beginning to face. But for fans, which I think, a lot of fans, maybe not the majority, but at least close to 50% of the fans, might not have been aware of what this guy was doing in NXT. You have to give them a reason to care about EC3 on the main roster. Well, they started to do that a little bit with this segment, but Ambrose comes out, interrupts it. He actually was initially interrupting Nia Jax, as you may have seen in that picture, but it led to him going at it with EC3. And Ambrose had some funny lines here. He said, where's EC1 and EC2? Good exchange. I thought that Dean Ambrose came off pretty good in this. And, maybe because, his fate has already potentially been decided, he's a little bit more free with what he can do. He's back to more of the Dean Ambrose that I think we wanted to see. He didn't seem real scripted in that. He seemed sort of off the cuff, sort of a sarcastic, verbally jabbing type heel. I enjoyed it. However, it leads to a match. The match was not very good. It seemed like, truth be told, they didn't have much chemistry, and Dean Ambrose at the end, just a minimal effort to sell the pinfall as EC3 sort of got him with like a roll-up. Ambrose just, kind of laid there like a dead fish. But EC3 gets the victory. It's a guy potentially leaving, putting over a newcomer. I thought they could have done better with the match, but I thought the exchange was interesting. But to me, this is big because it really does show Dean Ambrose. It seems like the way that they're booking him and using him, he's on his way out. He's finishing up his last couple months. He's going to put over some guys in the process, probably not be a real focal point of storylines, sort of be a mid-card type of guy, probably below what he had been doing over the past several months. We'll see if this feud continues. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys go at it again this upcoming Monday. But back to EC3 a little bit. Make a decision on a guy like this. Is he a face? If so, give the reasons that the fans want to see for why they should support him. It's just, you can't just say, oh, well, cheer for him because he's going against a bad guy. You need to be better than that. So we'll see. Heavy Machinery, that's already a team established as faces. We don't know what show they're going to be on. Nikki Cross is back and forth, face, heel. EC3 maybe following that same path. And then, of course, we've seen a little bit of Lacey Evans. She's clearly a heel. Lars Sullivan, still don't know what's going on with him. He was supposed to potentially be going against John Cena at WrestleMania, getting a monster push as a heel. That might have been sidetracked. So, these debuts that have been promised, they really haven't found the mark to this point. One last thing on Raw, the main event. I don't know where they're going with Kurt Angle. I really don't. I mean, Kurt Angle, to me, needed to be a special attraction upon his return to the ring in this second stint. His first match back, he was sort of thrown in. I believe it was an injury to Roman Reigns that made Angle part of the Shield. Kurt Angle still has a lot to offer, but he shouldn't be wrestling regularly on free television. I don't understand the purpose. They did like the fake retirement with Kurt this week, and then of course Drew McIntyre and Baron Corbin come out to interrupt it. It leads to Braun Strowman coming to Angle's defense, and ultimately a main event tag team match, Angle and Strowman, McIntyre and Corbin. One thing that I hate about pro wrestling, and it's really every company, it's not just WWE, but WWE should be better than this at this point. They do the same things over and over and over again. These fake retirements that get interrupted and lead to, storylines out of it, you can't do that so often that it loses its impact. When someone does want to retire, you don't even expect that you always have your guard up. Oh, well, this is probably not a real retirement. I remember when Edge came out and announced his retirement, I was thinking, oh, well, whoever, Alberto Del Rio or someone's going to come out and interrupt him and attack him. And they didn't, and it turned out to be a legitimate retirement. Or you have Mark Henry. People were buying that, and then he turns on John Cena. That was incredible. But when you do it so often, it just loses effect. And, that's what happened with Kurt Angle. It did. I never really thought that he was retiring. And when he was interrupted, it was like, well, whatever. I just expected that. It wasn't like, oh my God, I was invested in this moment, and now, he has a match later tonight. I'm not sure what the end game is with Kurt Angle. He was on the winning team with Strowman as they sort of had the last laugh. Corbin's a guy that, yeah, he could, take a loss here. Drew McIntyre, I'm not sure if they've sort of run out of ideas of where he's going to end up at WrestleMania. Maybe he's a guy that challenges John Cena now. But McIntyre was a special commodity up until a couple months ago. He lost his first match to Dolph Ziggler, which I love Ziggler, but that was just, not the way to have McIntyre finally lose on the main roster. And then since then, he hasn't been anything particularly special. He was one of the guys who had some hype going into the Rumble. Did not lead to anything, and now he's back with Corbin. That's a pairing that I don't think anybody wants. It actually brings down McIntyre. So, I'm not sure if Kurt Angle's going to continue in this storyline, and maybe if it leads to a match at WrestleMania, but he's already wrestled both of those guys. So you figure that's not going to carry through the next couple of months. So I don't know what awaits Kurt Angle, and quite frankly, right now, Braun Strowman seems like a guy who is sort of lost, and I think you could have said that for the last couple months. Really basically the last year, going back with Braun Strowman. So it just feels like those guys in the main event, find something better, something more interesting for them to do. And again, don't have Kurt Angle wrestle on a regular basis on Raw. It just takes away from what he should be, which is a special attraction, a Triple H type guy who wrestles maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year at big shows, meaningful storylines, meaningful matches. When you have him wrestling Corbin and McIntyre all the time, it takes away. Let's jump over to Smackdown, and not as much to discuss. We already talked about Becky Lynch and her exchange with Triple H, sort of following up with her and Stephanie from the night before. Charlotte was also part of that, and again, they continue to tease Charlotte maybe taking Becky's spot, which I do think ultimately leads to a triple threat at WrestleMania, unfortunately. One of the questions that I've had for weeks is, what does SmackDown do for its WWE Championship match at WrestleMania? Well, we know Daniel Bryan's defending his new title, the Hemp and Wood belt, inside Elimination Chamber with 5 challengers, Joe, Jeff Hardy, Randy Orton, Mustafa Ali, and AJ Styles. That should be terrific. I don't know what's going to happen. I think Daniel Bryan's going to keep the title, but if he does, who does he go against at WrestleMania? It wouldn't seemingly make sense to have any of those 5 guys challenge, because we've sort of already, seen it right before. You want something fresh and new. AJ Styles is already, challenged for the title, so I don't think it's going to be him. If Daniel Bryan does retain, you're probably not ready for Mustafa Ali main eventing for a championship at WrestleMania. The other guys, they're sort of the two heels, Randy Orton, Samoa Joe. I don't see that happening. So Jeff Hardy's a possibility. Yes, it would be a nice little nostalgia thing for Jeff Hardy. Could they make it happen? Yeah, certainly. Would that feel like a WrestleMania championship main event? Not to me, but maybe. I guess it depends on how they present it. I'm starting to think, however, that the choice will ultimately be John Cena. So if Daniel Bryan does retain in the Elimination Chamber, they get John Cena to come to SmackDown. All of a sudden, you have sort of a built-in storyline with the real life, with the Bellas, of course, John breaking up with Nikki, Daniel being married to Brie Bella. You have guys that are sort of opposites. You have Mr. Hollywood and John Cena. He kind of just epitomizes everything that Daniel Bryan seems to hate. So it doesn't seem like there's anyone that's real clear-cut. I think it might be John Cena. We'll see how it pans out. But two of the guys who will be challenging inside the chamber against Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, Mustafa Ali, I think they were the bright spot of SmackDown. And I've been saying repeatedly it's either Andrade Cien Almas or Mustafa Ali who really capture my attention each and every week. Well, this week it was the Viper and the Heart, formerly of 205 Live, Mustafa Ali, who had a terrific match. Great finish. Randy Orton sort of rips Mustafa off the top rope into a RKO. It looked incredible. Some people are down on Randy Orton. Oh, he's boring, whatever. Justin Lowry, I think, would sort of agree with that. Like, yeah, he's a legend, but I don't get that excited to see him. This is the type of stuff Randy Orton, really shows his greatness in. And that's, a TV match that I think you could say is maybe the best television match of 2019 to this point. I know we're only, 5 weeks in, but it was outstanding. It continues to show that Mustafa Ali deserves to be in a spot that he's in, and it shows that Randy Orton has plenty left. Now, will it ultimately lead to anything bigger? Maybe will these two go into a storyline against each other heading into WrestleMania after Elimination Chamber? Maybe. I mean, it certainly whet the appetite of myself, and I'm sure most of the fans who are watching. But really good stuff. SmackDown continues to have at least one, usually two great matches each and every week on television. And while Raw has some good matches as well, I think you can, pretty clearly, assume that you're going to get just terrific in-ring action when you watch SmackDown each and every week. The thing that I didn't really like on SmackDown, and it started a week prior, is just sort of a bizarre pairing of Rusev and Nakamura. And it started with R-Truth defeating Nakamura, who defeated Rusev 2 nights earlier at the Royal Rumble to win the U.S. title. So R-Truth wins it from Nakamura, controversial fashion with a roll-up that really did not elicit a true 3 count, but the ref counted 3. It looked like a botch. Rusev comes out. He immediately challenges R-Truth. R-Truth wins that one, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, without any explanation, Rusev and Nakamura attack R-Truth together. Yes, they were just feuding. Yes, it involved Rusev blaming Nakamura for Lana being injured. So why would these two, form an alliance? Doesn't make any sense. Well, now they become a tag team, and they defeat the Good Brothers, who, Anderson and Gallows, to me, those guys, there's so much talk about people leaving for All Elite. That would be a team that would make a lot of sense to leave. They just never connected. To me, they're boring. They're okay in the ring, but I really don't care about their matches. They've never really gotten that push. I think very briefly they were tag team champions, but it was a forgettable reign. Other than that, they've either been on the sidelines or on the losing end. They lose again to Nakamura and Rusev, but the bigger question is why? What are they planning here? Lana was part of helping Nakamura out in that match, so they're kind of showing like, oh, this is a tandem that's coming together, coalescing. It just seems like we don't know what to do with Rusev. We don't know what to do with Nakamura. Let's put them together in a tag team. And where they go from here, I don't know. Do they go against the New Day? We know the Usos are challenging Shane and The Miz at Elimination Chamber for the tag team championships. Nakamura is not as good as what people thought he was going to be. I've been very disappointed. Rusev, He's been over at times. It's starting to die down a little bit. I think losing Aiden English and that storyline ending prematurely hurt him. So they throw these guys together. Both of them seemingly have not been too happy with their spot in the company. Now they're sort of, company and misery. So we'll see what ends up happening, but it seems like two guys that probably should be doing more than just a hastily thrown together tag team. That's one of the few things that I think SmackDown has struggled with is those two guys have not had really good, consistent roles to utilize their talents. And at times, they were two of the most over guys in this company, really within the past year. And it shows how far and how quickly they have fallen out of favor. That's pretty much it from this week. Again, the big news, Kenny Omega to All Elite, and then Becky Lynch now on both shows, now interacting with Triple H and Stephanie, the Authority. It seems like they're going full force with pushing Becky to the moon. Again, I don't think they need to help her in that regard, but that's what they decided to do. We'll see how it all plays out. Hopefully we will have Justin Lowry back next week. Want to get his thoughts. It's been a few weeks since we've talked to him. Haven't had a chance to talk to him since he's become a new father to little Grayson. So hopefully we'll welcome Justin back. But either way, we'll be back once again next week with the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Remember to check us out on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like the videos, go back and check them all out. We're getting close to a 1-year anniversary. That'll be upcoming in a little bit less than 2 months. But for now, this is Sean Meyers signing off. You've been watching another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.